Discipline feels impossible for most people, but not for the reasons they think. It's not because they're lazy, broken, or incapable of change, and it's not because they lack motivation or willpower. The real reason discipline feels impossible is much quieter than that. It's happening underneath awareness, inside the nervous system, long before a conscious decision is ever made. Your brain didn't evolve to help you become successful, fulfilled, or disciplined. It evolved to keep you safe. And for most of human history, safety meant conserving energy, avoiding unnecessary effort, and staying close to what was familiar. Effort meant risk. Discomfort meant danger. Comfort meant survival. That logic is still running your life today, even though the world has completely changed. Every time you decide you want to be more disciplined, your brain doesn't hear growth, it hears threat, it hears uncertainty, it hears effort without guaranteed reward. And the moment that happens, resistance appears. Not as pain, not as fear you can clearly identify, but as heaviness, distraction, tiredness, hesitation, a subtle pull back toward comfort. That's why discipline feels like swimming upstream, because in a way, it is. Your brain has become extremely good at one thing, minimizing discomfort. It does this automatically. It doesn't ask what kind of life you want. It doesn't care about your long-term goals. It only cares about regulating your internal state in the short term, reducing tension, avoiding discomfort, returning you to what feels safe and familiar. And modern life feeds that system perfectly. Today, comfort is instant. You can escape discomfort in seconds. A screen, a scroll, a notification, sugar, entertainment, endless stimulation. Your brain learns very quickly that it doesn't need to endure anything unpleasant for long. Relief is always available. So when you try to do something that requires sustained effort, focus, or uncertainty, your nervous system reacts as if something is wrong. It pulls you away. It convinces you to delay, to rest, to wait until you feel ready. And because this happens internally, it feels like your own voice. You think, I just don't have discipline. But what's really happening is that your brain has been trained to associate comfort with safety and discomfort with danger. That association doesn't come from nowhere. It usually starts early, in childhood, in environments where being uncomfortable meant being criticized, rejected, overwhelmed, or unsupported, where mistakes felt unsafe, where effort didn't always lead to reward. So the nervous system learned to avoid strain, to stay small, to stay regulated by staying comfortable. Over time, that becomes automatic. So now, as an adult, even when you consciously want change, your body resists it. Not because you don't want better, but because your nervous system doesn't trust discomfort. It doesn't see effort as a path forward. It sees it as something to escape. This is the hidden reason discipline feels impossible, because discipline requires staying present with discomfort without immediately neutralizing it. And most people have never trained that capacity. In fact, they've trained the opposite. Every time discomfort appears and you distract yourself, numb yourself, postpone, or escape, your brain learns something very specific. Discomfort is not tolerable. And the more that lesson is reinforced, the smaller your tolerance becomes, until even small challenges feel overwhelming. At that point, discipline doesn't just feel hard, it feels unreachable. Not because the task is too big, but because your nervous system has lost the ability to stay engaged under pressure. And here's the part most people misunderstand. Discipline is not something you force into existence. You don't become disciplined by pushing harder against resistance. That only strengthens the association between effort and pain. Discipline emerges naturally when your nervous system no longer panics in the presence of discomfort. That's why some people seem effortlessly disciplined. It's not because they enjoy effort more, it's because their system learned at some point that discomfort is survivable, that effort doesn't equal danger, that tension can be held without collapse. Discipline, at its core, is emotional tolerance. The tolerance to feel bored without escaping, to feel uncertain without freezing, to feel resistance without obeying it. And when that tolerance is low, no amount of motivation will save you. Motivation fades. Discipline is what remains when motivation is gone. The problem is that most people try to build discipline at the level of behavior when the real work needs to happen at the level of the nervous system. They try to change actions without changing what their body associates with safety. So every attempt feels like self-betrayal. Every failure reinforces the story that something is wrong with them, and the cycle continues. But nothing is wrong with you. Your brain is just doing what it was trained to do. And once you understand that, discipline stops being a moral struggle and starts becoming a neurological process, a retraining, a slow reversal of comfort addiction, a rebuilding of your relationship with discomfort. And that's where real change begins. Once you see that discipline is not a character flaw but a nervous system pattern, something inside you starts to relax, the self-hatred softens, the pressure eases, and in that space a more honest question appears. If nothing is wrong with me, then what exactly is happening when I try to change and fail? What's happening is not lack of desire. Most people deeply want their lives to change. They want clarity, stability, direction, meaning. They want to feel proud of themselves. They want to stop repeating the same patterns. The frustration doesn't come from not wanting change. It comes from wanting it and feeling unable to move. That gap between intention and action is where discipline collapses. And the reason that gap exists is because your brain is constantly predicting outcomes based on past experiences. It's not responding to the present moment, it's responding to memory. Every time you tried to be consistent and failed, every time effort didn't pay off, every time you were judged, ignored, or disappointed, those experiences were stored, not as stories, but as sensations, as tension, as expectation, as an internal signal that says this is risky. So when you sit down to work, when you try to commit, when you attempt to show up differently, your body remembers before your mind does. A subtle contraction appears, a heaviness, a resistance that doesn't have words. And because that sensation is uncomfortable, your brain immediately looks for relief. Relief doesn't always look like pleasure. Sometimes it looks like thinking, overanalyzing, planning, consuming more information, waiting for the perfect moment. Those behaviors feel productive, but they serve the same function as distraction. They delay action while giving the illusion of safety. This is why discipline feels like it disappears the moment you need it most. Because discipline is required precisely when your nervous system is uncomfortable, and discomfort is what your brain has been trained to avoid at all costs. Over time, this avoidance becomes identity. You don't just avoid discomfort, you see yourself as someone who can't stick to things, someone who always starts and stops, someone who lacks discipline. And identities are powerful. Once the brain adopts an identity, it begins filtering reality to confirm it. Every small failure becomes proof. Every hesitation reinforces the story, and the nervous system tightens even more. This is where many people get stuck for years. They think discipline is about adding something, more effort, more structure, more pressure. But the truth is, discipline emerges when something is removed, the need for immediate relief. As long as your brain believes it must escape discomfort to stay safe, discipline will always feel unnatural. But the moment your nervous system learns that discomfort is not a threat, everything shifts. This learning doesn't happen through logic. You can understand all of this intellectually and still feel stuck,
Because the nervous system doesn't respond to explanations, it responds to experience. It updates itself only when you stay present through sensations you used to escape. That's why change feels so slow at first, because you're not just changing behavior, you're changing what your body believes is survivable. Most people quit right before this shift happens. They feel resistance and interpret it as failure, instead of recognizing it as the exact moment the nervous system is being challenged. They mistake discomfort for a sign to stop, when in reality, it's the doorway. The irony is that discipline doesn't require you to feel strong. It requires you to feel uncomfortable and not run. That's it. Not heroics, not intensity, not perfection. Just staying. Staying with the boredom. Staying with the tension. Staying with the urge to escape. Each time you do that, even briefly, your nervous system learns something new. It learns that nothing bad happened, that you survived, that the discomfort rose and fell without destroying you. And slowly, very slowly, resistance loses its power. This is why small, almost insignificant acts of discipline are more powerful than dramatic bursts of effort, because they teach safety, not force. Your brain doesn't need to be dominated, it needs to be retrained. And the moment discipline stops being about control and starts being about tolerance, it stops feeling impossible. It starts feeling quiet, less dramatic, less emotional, less charged. You still feel resistance, but it no longer owns you. And in the next part, we'll go even deeper into how comfort addiction silently shapes your daily decisions, your identity, and your sense of self, and how breaking that loop doesn't require becoming harder, but becoming more present than you've ever been before. There's a moment most people never notice, a quiet moment, almost invisible. It's the exact point where discipline could begin and where it dies instead. Nothing dramatic happens, no crisis, no collapse, just a small internal shift, a thought like, "I'll do it later." And in that moment, your brain breathes in relief. Because discipline doesn't fail due to laziness, it fails because it threatens familiarity. Your nervous system does not care about your goals. It does not care about your future self, your potential, or the life you imagine living someday. Its only job is to keep the present version of you alive and emotionally regulated. And it learned how to do that a long time ago, long before ambition, long before awareness, long before language. Your brain learned safety through repetition. Whatever you repeated became safe, regardless of whether it was good for you or not. Chaos can feel safe. Struggle can feel safe. Underachievement can feel safe, as long as it's familiar. Discipline, by definition, breaks familiarity. It asks you to act without emotional permission, to move before certainty, to tolerate friction without immediate reward. And to a nervous system wired around comfort, that feels like risk. That's why discipline triggers such a strong internal response. You feel tired before you even start, distracted before you even focus, overwhelmed before the task is objectively difficult. Those sensations are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that something is working against old programming. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your brain associates comfort with survival and discomfort with danger, even when the discomfort is what would save you long term. So when you try to become disciplined, you're not fighting bad habits, you're challenging a survival strategy that once made sense, and the brain defends survival strategies fiercely. This is why discipline feels emotional, why it feels heavy, why it feels personal. You're not just deciding to act, you're telling your nervous system that the old way of staying safe is no longer enough. That's a threat, and threats activate resistance. Resistance doesn't show up as fear most of the time. It shows up as rationalization, as delay, as perfectionism, as researching more, as waiting for the perfect moment. Comfort is patient. It doesn't rush you. It whispers. It says there's no need to suffer today. And every time you listen, the pathway strengthens. Over time, this creates a loop. You feel stuck. You try to change. Discipline feels impossible. You return to comfort. And the identity of someone who struggles with discipline becomes more solid. Eventually, even thinking about consistency feels exhausting. Not because the actions are hard, but because your brain already expects failure. This is where most people turn discipline into a moral issue. They call themselves weak, lazy, broken, and that only deepens the loop. Because shame is still familiar. Shame keeps you small. Shame keeps expectations low. Shame allows you to stay where you are without risking disappointment. But discipline was never meant to come from shame. It comes from regulation. When your nervous system learns that discomfort does not equal danger, discipline stops feeling like force. It starts feeling like alignment, like something quiet clicking into place. But before that happens, there's an in-between phase. A phase where you no longer feel fully comfortable, but you don't yet feel empowered. This is the phase where people quit, because comfort is gone, but confidence hasn't arrived. You're not numbing yourself as much anymore. You're not escaping as easily, and yet the rewards of discipline haven't shown up. This phase feels empty, uncertain, boring, and deeply uncomfortable. And yet this is where the rewiring happens. If you stay here long enough, without dramatizing it, without forcing motivation, without making it personal, your nervous system starts to update its assumptions. It begins to realize that nothing bad happens when you don't obey comfort. And once that realization settles in, discipline stops feeling impossible. In the final part, I'll show you how to move through that phase without burning out. Why small neutral actions are more powerful than intense bursts of effort, and how discipline becomes something you are, not something you force. At some point, discipline stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like a baseline. Not because life becomes easier, but because your nervous system stops interpreting effort as a threat. This is the shift most people never reach. They keep trying to add discipline on top of a nervous system that is still addicted to comfort, and that's why it never lasts. You cannot build consistency on top of internal resistance. You have to dissolve the resistance first. And dissolving it doesn't mean fighting it. It means teaching your body a new reference point. The mistake most people make is trying to feel motivated before they act. But motivation is not the cause of discipline. It's the result of repeated neutral action. Action without emotional negotiation. Action without self-judgment. You don't wait to feel ready. You move while readiness is absent. Not aggressively, not heroically, just calmly. When you act without drama, something important happens. Your nervous system observes that discomfort rises and then falls. No catastrophe, no collapse, just sensation. This rewires the association.
Discomfort stops meaning danger. Effort stops meaning punishment. Discipline stops meaning loss. And once that happens, comfort loses its grip. Not because you hate comfort, but because it no longer controls you. You start to notice that comfort is not rest. It's avoidance dressed as relief. Real rest feels different. Real rest comes after engagement, not instead of it. This is why disciplined people don't feel deprived. They feel grounded. Their nervous systems are regulated, not suppressed. And here's the most important part. Discipline is not about becoming someone new. It's about removing the false identity built around avoidance. The identity that says, this is just how I am. That identity was learned, and what was learned can be unlearned. You don't need more intensity. You don't need a better system. You don't need a dramatic breakthrough. You need consistency at a level your nervous system can tolerate. Small actions, repeated, without emotional charge.
Every time you act despite resistance, without forcing yourself, without shaming yourself, you send a signal. I can be uncomfortable and still be safe. That signal changes everything. Over time, discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like integrity, like your actions and your self-image finally matching. And when that alignment happens, momentum takes over. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need motivation. The kind that doesn't post about consistency. The kind that simply shows up. If discipline has felt impossible in your life, it was never because you lacked strength. It was because your nervous system was trained to equate comfort with survival. Once you see that, you stop fighting yourself. And when you stop fighting yourself, discipline stops feeling impossible. It becomes inevitable.